Hello everyone, Sharon here from Signature Recruitment. I'm the co-founder of Signature and Bristol Director. With me is Evelyn, my business partner and our London Director. Also Rich Roberts, People Director from Pure Planet and our Employee Engagement and Culture Specialist. Welcome to our webinar. Today, Rich will be sharing with us his wisdom on employee engagement in the current climate. As organisations continue to make difficult decisions regarding redundancies, working from home looks to remain long-term, and the job market starts to pick up, creating more movement. As employers, we've got some challenges to face regarding engaging our people. Formerly HR Director and Head of Employee Engagement at Virgin Mobile, Rich is currently the People Director at sustainable energy provider Pure Planet on a part-time basis. Pure Planet have recently been ranked second in the Sunday Times Top 100 Best Small Companies to Work For. He also runs the Employee Engagement Consultancy in Rich. I shall now hand you over to Evelyn, who'd like to say a few words.
Thanks, Sharon. Welcome, everyone. Just a quick hello from the London office. It's great to see so many of our clients joining us to get some practical tips on how to engage and motivate our teams. In order to support and to continue to add value, you may remember we asked you a few questions back in May. One of them was, what are your key priorities at the moment? And 44% responded with team well-being and engagement being on top of the list. So hopefully today's webinar will be really, really helpful. In regards to the format of the webinar, Richard will share his expertise for about 30 minutes, and there will be plenty of opportunity throughout to ask questions. So if you have any, just please put them in the Q&A box at the bottom of your screen. So without further ado, I will hand over to Richard now.
Thank you very much. So I'm on a mission. My mission is to make workplaces enjoyable places to be. And I know that might sound a bit odd, but why is this important? Well, I believe that if people enjoy being at work, then they're going to be more productive, more motivated, and more engaged. And also, if you look at all the research, it clearly gives evidence that it has a big positive effect on the bottom line. And of course, if people are more engaged and more motivated, I believe that has a very positive impact upon people's well-being. So, good morning, it's great to be here. What I'd like to do this morning is really tackle this issue and this topic in two stages. First of all, I just want to set the scene and talk about kind of my philosophy on employee engagement and culture. And then I'll give you an opportunity to do a quick Q&A. And then the second part is I'm going to talk you through 10 ways that I've learned, mainly through the mistakes I've made, about creating an engaging culture, in particularly with what the situation is now and how we can really engage and make our teams productive as we come out of lockdown and move to whatever is the new normal. So I'm often asked, what is the magic formula, Rich? What do I need to do to have an engaged team and have a productive workforce? What's the fairy dust that needs to be sprinkled? What's the magic bullet, if you like? Well, I've traveled the world in search of that magic formula, let me tell you. I've been to Clevedon, Trowbridge, even I went to Bath once. And that holy grail of engagement, I'm afraid, doesn't exist. That's the bad news. Because from my experience, what it does take is a lot of time, a lot of effort, a lot of thought, and also a lot of trial and error. But on my search around the world for that holy grail, I did come across a team which I thought was the most engaged team that I've ever come across. And these were the game makers at the London Olympics. And maybe some of you in the audience today were game makers. Now, I went out early in the event I was competing in, so I had a lot of time to mix and mingle with the games makers. And I was fascinated by how engaged, how enthusiastic they were as they dealt with the spectators, if you like. And, you know, I asked a lot of them, why did you do this? And a lot of them, bear in mind, took time off work. They were all volunteers. And I got the same answer back time and time again. And that was, their answer was, I want to be a part of something. For me, this is a fundamental part of creating an engaged culture. Having a sense of belonging, this feeling of being a part of something, being part of a team, being a part of something bigger. And this, for me, as I said, is a real fundamental part. And indeed, two academics by the name of Baumeister and O'Leary have done a lot of research into this on an academic level. And they say that this sense of belonging is actually the most important engagement driver. And indeed, they go on to say that if you don't belong, you don't feel value, which is quite a significant thing when you think about employee engagement. When I worked at Virgin Mobile, and I worked there for 10 years, I realized that they were really good at building this sense of belonging. They used to call everybody who worked at Virgin the Virgin Tribe, for example. And there were lots of things that they did that kind of inspirited this kind of this teamwork, all in it together. And this is just one very small example I thought I'd share with you, which is, this is in the staff restaurant. And this is, as you can see, is the Virgin Mobile logo. What you see on the right in the mobile part is everybody's photograph. We took passport photographs of everybody, and as you can see, you can just about make out that they are people's faces. So that's everybody who worked at Mobile. And then on the left hand side in the red, what we did was get everybody to queue up. We got a big pot of paint, and this actually is their paw prints. So everybody is a part of the Virgin Mobile logo. You've got your paw print and you've got your photograph. And for me, this just kind of represents that kind of sense of you're there. And you saw that every morning because everybody went to the restaurant and or the canteen every day, and you walked past it. So you had that sense of, yeah, I'm up there, I'm in that logo. The other thing about the games makers that I learned was they had a very clear and meaningful purpose. I mean, their purpose was really clear, wasn't it? It was to make the London Olympics the best Olympics ever. And I think having a clear purpose, again, is a really important part of engagement. I saw this picture in an office in Bath about 12 months ago, and it kind of represents for me what this part of purpose is all about. It's by Simon Sinek, as you can see. I don't know if you're aware of Simon Sinek, but he talks a lot about the why, the purpose of an organization. And actually he wrote a best-selling book called Start With Why. I mean, he says a lot of companies can tell you what they do. They can tell you how they do it, but very few companies can tell you the why. And it is the why that people want to know. People want to know what the purpose of the organization is. They want to know how their role aligns to that purpose, and why should they put in this extra effort and go the extra mile to work for that company. So I think it's really important to ask, you know, why should people in your organization put in that extra effort at work or go the extra mile? What is the purpose in terms of that? The other clear aspect for me as well is this one. And this really lies at the heart of employee engagement. If you take the sense of belonging, the purpose, it is actually all about trust. You know, going back thousands of years, the brain has actually evolved and designed to keep us safe. We like the feeling of being safe. And indeed, the last few months as we've been in lockdown, this has been particularly important now. I don't think you can actually perform at your best ability if you don't feel safe, and actually if you don't feel trusted. And indeed, I've been looking and reflecting a lot during lockdown, and I was thinking, why is it that I really enjoy working at Pure Planet? And indeed, it's probably the best role that I've ever had in my career. And I think on reflection, it's because I can really be myself. And why can I be myself? It's because I feel safe and I feel trusted. I feel that my opinions will be listened to. And indeed, you know, I've worked in companies before when I haven't spoken out, I haven't said what I feel because I fear of what the repercussions could be if I did that. And really that is a real tester for me in a culture in terms of trust. You know, what happens when you speak out in the organization? Is that okay? Or is that not okay? And that is a real key area around this psychological safety and this area of trust. So for me, there are three key kind of foundation stones towards creating this culture. It's about creating a sense of belonging, it's having a clear and meaningful purpose, and it's about having a really trusting culture. The other aspect as well is that what I've learned over the years is that I think genuinely people come to work wanting to do a good job. They come to work wanting to be motivated, to be productive. But actually, it's what happens when you're at work, it's what the company does that often demotivates. So this is the rules, this is the bureaucracy, if you like, and this may be the politics. So for me, when people talk to me about engagement and they say to me, what should I start doing in my organization? I sit back and ask the question, actually, what are the things that you should stop doing? What are the things that are getting in the way of people performing at their best and being motivated? And of course, trust is at the center of that. And I remember working for an organization which had an employee handbook, which was that thick. It was just full of rules. That's what the employment handbook was. And it sent a very clear message to everybody who worked in that organization that this was a rule-bound culture and we don't trust you because we don't want you to break the rules. So where should we start? This is a very complex area. As we know, people behave differently. People have different motivations. People look at things in lots of different ways. So it is a very complex area. For me, a really good start point is to look at what actually does motivate people. And I don't know if you've come across the work of Dan Pink. He wrote a book about 5 years ago called Drive. There's a lovely little video on YouTube that kind of explains what his theory around motivation. And indeed, this picture you see here is taken from that video. And he said, after a lot of research into this area, that actually there are three key things that motivate us all deep down. And these are the three things. And indeed, whenever I'm looking at a new initiative or things that we're doing, be it in an organization or at Pure Planet, I will ask these questions, kind of tester questions. And it is around, first of all, autonomy. So are you giving people autonomy? Do they have control over what they do? Is it a very self-managed culture, for example? Do you let people get on with it? The second one is around expertise. So it's around developing people to be experts in their actual area. But also I think associated with that is around recognition and achievement. That feeling that if you are an expert, that you do achieve, that you reach your goals, and that gives you a lot of personal satisfaction. And then finally, back to the Simon Sinek one around purpose, around this sense of purpose in your role and in the company that you actually work for. So again, I think this is a really good start point in terms of this area. The last point I would make on this first part is we often think about what the company is doing and what the company wants to do. And I think that often you should take the opposite approach and actually ask your people what they want. And it's interesting because I recently saw some research based on the lockdown and what people and employees want at the moment from their employees. And this is what came out as the key things. It's around being authentic. And often that's about the leaders, but that's all about being yourself. It's about recognition, about support. In particular at the moment, and I'll talk more about this in part 2, it's about empathy and understanding, because we're all in very difficult situations at the moment in terms of COVID-19. It's about reassurance. It's about being open and transparent. and actually knowing what's going on. And this is a really good checklist, I think, in terms of looking at your culture and how you are treating your employees. So that's the end of part one. I thought I'd take a slight break and have a glass of water and open it up to the floor just to see if there's any questions before we move on to part two.
Thanks, Richard. I can see a couple are typing, so I'll just wait for that to come through.
Is it the shopping list? Don't forget to call mum.
So yeah, so if anybody has any questions, like we'll have another Q&A session after Richard's second session. But yeah, feel free to put your questions forward and Richard will endeavour to answer as many of them as possible. So we had a couple of questions coming through, so hopefully, Richard, we could cover both of them.
Sure.
One of them is, how do you see working remotely impacting the sense of belonging versus working in an office? What are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, I cover that in part two, but for me, it's thinking through very carefully about how do we keep people connected. I mean, tech can help enormously with that, obviously, but my experience, and we've been working remotely at Pure Planet for the last 4 months, is people can easily get very isolated. They can go off the radar, and it's absolutely essential for me that managers, leaders are really keeping in touch with people in whatever way is the most natural way, be it with virtual calls, through team meetings, and if people do slip off the radar, then you need to take action. So for example, there are 100 people that work at Pure Planet. Every week we have a Slack system. Every week I send everybody a personalized message just to check in and make sure everybody's okay. And if they don't respond, I make a note and just follow up on that. Well-being, and I'll touch upon this in part two as well, has been a particular issue for us, which is really, and we've had people who are, not in good places because of that, because of lockdown. So again, that is a really important part of just keeping in touch and helping people and supporting people.
Oh, great. Thanks, Richard. We've got a couple of more questions. What book has had the most impact on your views on people being happy at work? I know you mentioned a couple already, but yeah, which one has had the most impact?
My daughter's reading the Secret 7 series at the moment. That's been particularly good. But I suppose there's 2 or 3 things I would recommend. There's a book by Bruce Daisley, which, actually, I've got it just here. Bear with me a second because it's on my shelf, which is called The Joy of Work. It doesn't work virtually, does it, when you lean across? So there's this book called The Joy of Work by Bruce Daisley. He used to run Twitter, and that is, he does a podcast called Eat, Sleep, Work, Repeat, which I'd highly recommend if you're into podcasts. Loads of great topics and great speakers around engagement. Drive by Dan Pink, which I've mentioned, is also a really good read. And anything by Simon Sinek. He's written a number of books now. He's got a very active LinkedIn account as well, and he posts little videos on there every day, which are literally about 30 seconds, which are always spot on and kind of sum up kind of what's going on at the moment, as well as cultural things. The other thing I would recommend is Lucy Adams runs an organization called HR Disruptive. And so if you work in HR or have a particular interest in people, again, that is a really effective website. You can sign up. There's a sort of a club as well part to it as well, which you get special articles and blogs. But she talks a lot about culture. She talks a lot about throwing out all the traditional HR ways of working, which I definitely believe in, you know, throwing out annual appraisals, the rule book, all that kind of stuff, which for some HR people is a bit radical. But again, it's just taking away all the bureaucracy and all the rules, as we mentioned before. So that, again, would be a top recommendation.
Great. Thank you, Richard. There are a couple of questions. They're quite similar. So I wonder if there's time for a third one, if we kind of merge two of them into one. So one of the questions was, do the dynamics change depending on the size of the organization? And then somebody mentioned, what's your advice for large centralized organizations? So I thought,
great question. Yeah, absolutely. So my experience with that, so I joined Virgin Mobile. I was number 27 employee when I joined Virgin Mobile, and we grew to 2,000 at its height, and then it all got merged into Virgin Media, which is a completely another story. You know, it's interesting when we got, and it's similar for Pure Planet now, once you get to 100 plus, this gets far more difficult to deliver. You can still obviously deliver it, but you just have to think through different ways of doing it. So for example, on the keeping connected bit, you are far more reliant then on heads of teams or middle managers to deliver, if you like, or take action. So, and I'll talk about this in part two. For me, the most important part of employee engagement when you have a larger organization is your middle management layer and how good they are at managing their people, at communicating, at coaching, and at motivating. Because it's, you know, at Pure Planet, when, you know, I started at Pure Planet right at the beginning and there was 4 of us, that was really easy. You were sitting around a table basically. But as you grow, absolutely, it is the key challenge. And indeed, we are now at Pure Planet thinking through, okay, when we get, because we've doubled in size in 12 months, we're going to double in size again in the next 12 months. What do we need to do differently? Our CEO talks about how do we nurture and protect the culture that we've built. It's not going to be the same. The principles will be the same, but it's thinking through, and indeed, as I go through some of the examples in part two, it might spark a few ideas and it might stimulate a few thoughts for the person who's asked that question. But yes, that is a key. That's a great question. And what was part two? Was it a similar one? Sorry, the part two question.
Do the dynamics change depending on the size of the organization?
Yeah, definitely, absolutely. And this will be music to your ears, and I will talk about this in part two as well, I promise. The key thing is to recruit the right people into the organization. So recruitment is, again, a very key part to make sure that you're recruiting the people with the right mindset for the culture that you have.
Yeah. Thanks, Richard. There's a couple of other questions that we hope to maybe answer after your second part of the presentation. So please bear with us, but we try to get through all the questions.
Yep. Just to let you know, I'm particularly good at capital cities in Europe. So if you've got any of those, if you could make it multiple choice, that would be lovely. So let's move on to part two. I thought the easiest way of doing this was to kind of take 10 areas really that I think a company should focus on in terms of looking at an engaging culture. And what I'll do as I go through those 10, I'll try and bring it to life to the current situation and what's kind of going on. As you see some of the examples of Pure Planet, you might be thinking, well, I have a very different company that I work in. The culture is very different. The size is very different. So that kind of wouldn't work. But I suppose my thought on that would be, have a think about the principles, which I'll talk to you about next, about why we've done these things and what the principles and culture that you're trying to achieve in your organization, and therefore what are the kind of things you're doing. And I suppose the philosophy behind that is, I've worked in companies where they've talked a good game. You can see the values plastered all over the walls, for example, but actually when you work there on a day-to-day basis, it doesn't live up to that. So I'm very much into having things that staff can see, can feel, can experience, that really does emphasize the culture. So that's kind of the backdrop behind it all. So if you're of my generation, it's top of the pops time, the top 10. So straight in at number 1 is purpose, which we talked about before. Now, at Pure Planet, we have a very clear purpose, and that is around renewable energy. And as Sharon picked up on at the beginning, we actually supply renewable energy to domestic companies, people in the UK. And yeah, maybe in the audience, we have some customers today. We're based in Bath. We launched 4 years ago, and we employ about 100 people. So this is a real key focus for us. And people are motivated by this. The whole sustainable agenda, we think Greta should be the president, the prime minister of every country in the world, for example, has really built up a lot of momentum, especially in the last 5 years. So a lot of people are really interested in this. A lot of people will join us because of it. And indeed, if you don't have a passion for this, then we wouldn't recruit you in the first place. So the clear purpose really is important. And I think if you relate it to the situation we're in now, I think employees are considering and reflecting what's really important to them right now. Maybe it's their lifestyle, maybe they've experienced a different way of working, more flexibility of work, for example, and they do need this sense of belonging and purpose. And indeed, if you relate that to organizations, this needs to be a key focus for leaders to keep everybody connected and informed. And as I said, it's very easy to write the words. It's very easy to have a glossy poster with all this on, but what do you do internally to really clearly demonstrate that? And of course, we have an external purpose. So we are supplying renewable energy to domestic customers, but also we translate that internally. And just a few of the things we do internally on the sustainable agenda. So Anna on the left-hand side there is clutching a tree. So we give every new employee, for example, a tree. It's their welcoming gift, and it is a tree, and they can plant it in their back garden. Or if they don't have a back garden to plant it in, there is a Woodland Trust community project just down the road from us. So we will plant a tree there instead. So that's a very small example. We also carbon offset everybody's commute when we actually do go to the office, and that then funds various projects. So one of the projects you'll see on the top left, that's Brazil nut farmer there in the Amazon basin in Peru, a very sustainable project. So it's all about planting trees, but it's also about giving jobs to the local community as well. So all that offsetting goes towards that. We also do a lot of recycling. I suspect you would expect that if you like, but we recycle far more than you would domestically. So anything that you can recycle, we try and recycle on the right hand side there. And also you can see shopping bags at the top there. So if somebody's going shopping in Bath at lunchtime, they grab a bag, they go shopping, and then they put it back in when they finish with it. And then finally, we try and encourage all of our staff to do a lot of volunteering in the local community. We give our staff paid days to do that. And indeed, we work with Wicked Weather, which is a local charity, and they actually go into schools and they teach junior school kids about climate change. So we go in and support that, and we build the programs with them. And a lot of our team really enjoy that because it means going out into the community and going back to school. So there's just a few examples of how we've translated our purpose into the sustainable angle on an internal basis. The second thing is about leadership. Now we're in very worrying times, and clear leadership is vital at this point, offering huge support and can really boost employee engagement. And people are really looking to the leadership team now. It does come with the responsibility of being a leader, of course. I know of certain organizations that my friends work into, and the leaders are not stepping up to the plate. And in fact, they're burying their head in the sand from my conversations with them. And now is the time, really, because people need this sense of direction. They need understanding. They need reassurance to really counter all of this uncertainty that's going on. And really, this is the start point for our culture at Pure Planet. And it really lies at the heart of the way we do things, is around this leadership team and their style. The style of the leaders is very open, it's very honest, it's very visible. We are all in an open plan office, so we don't have any management offices. And most importantly, we don't have any egos. We have a very flat structure, for example. And we're very fortunate that we have little politics. And I think that is one of the key things that I've experienced with various companies that I've worked with, which really do get in the way, is when you get into the egos and the politics and the status. And the other thing they have is a very clear vision, and they have a very clear vision of how to deal with this situation that we're in now, and also a very clear plan and vision about the future and the next 12 months and kind of the direction that Pure Planet is heading in. What supports this, of course, is very much what I would call a values-led culture. I'm sure you all work in organizations that have values. They may look very similar to these. I have a particular view about values. I think they can be overused. They can all look the same. There may be some smiles around the webinar. There may be some values on there that you have in your organization. I once worked for an engineering company that had all these lovely values around honesty and integrity and professionalism, but actually it was the worst company that I've ever experienced. I did some consultancy for them. They had a really macho command and control style. It was basically, I'll tell you what to do and you go off and do it, and if you don't, you're fired. And the values did not match at all what was going on internally. So I do think there is a value to values, but they need to be used in the right way. One of the issues I have also with values, they're quite prescriptive. So they tell people how to behave in a way which isn't really the Pure Planet style. So what we've done is we kind of flipped at Pure Planet. When we launched, we had a discussion around the importance of values, but we thought, well, actually, what are values there for? And for us, it's about what do we want our people to feel? How do we want our people to feel about working for Pure Planet? Because let's face it, employee engagement is a very emotional thing. It's about your behaviors. It's about the way you're treated and the way that you feel about working for the organization. So we came up with these 6 areas that we wanted people to feel this way about working for Pure Planet. And in effect, these are our values. So we wanted work to be meaningful. We wanted people to feel that they can be themselves, to be treated equally, to be proud, to feel trusted, and to feel that they belong and be a part of the team. And that's kind of our values. That's kind of our checklist. Now, we haven't published that anywhere. We haven't put it on a poster in a wall. I once worked for a CEO that said, the day you put your values on the wall will be the day that we failed. But that's kind of the way we operate and the way that we actually check ourselves that we're doing the right thing and being good. And indeed, if we pick up on the last one, again, that is a key thing around teamwork. And again, I think the sense of belonging, going back to that, it lies at the heart of employee engagement. And of course, this is a major challenge for organizations. And depending upon what situation they're in now, they may be having teams that have been furloughed. Half the team might be furloughed, half the team might not have been furloughed. Keeping the team together in a virtual, remote way, as we picked up on in the question section, is a challenge. And, the leaders of organizations, the HR teams, need to think through how to execute that in the best way so that people don't lose that sense of team. So for me, it's about having a plan. for me, it's putting a lot of thought into it. It's about using your tech in the most effective way. And if you do have teams, for example, that half have been furloughed and half have not, and you're trying to bring back together, I think it's all about having honest and open conversations around it and kind of addressing it head on. You know, I've been doing some work for a marketing team in Bristol, and they have this very issue at the moment. Half are furloughed, half are not, and they're gradually coming back together. And there is resentment between these two teams because of it. And we've done a lot of communications and talking to a lot of people around how they feel about it, and just trying to gradually bring that whole team back together. And it's not easy, but as I said, it takes a lot of hard work. So the next one is number 5, and I thought it was quiz time. So in a recent survey, what percentage of people said they would prefer a new manager to a pay rise? So if you can think of a number in your head, this doesn't work that well when you shout out virtually, but the answer is 72%. Now, when I saw this research, which was done by the Chartered Institute of Management, I was amazed. 72% of people said they prefer a new manager to a pay rise. So this is my number 5, really. It's about the importance of managers, and we touched upon this as well, of course, in the Q&A, and that middle management layer. Yeah. From my experience, and I know you'll find it's hard to believe that it's 30 years that I've been working in HR and culture. I did start when I was 7. Many people are not skilled in people management, let's face it. And people are often promoted into these roles because they're probably technically good at what they do. And actually, it's the only way to get promoted in an organization. And indeed, I did some work for a tech team recently, and their middle managers, most of them said to me, actually, I don't want to manage people. I just want to do my tech. I want to be a developer. I want to invent things. People just get in the way. They're unpredictable. They're not a programming code. So for me, and if you're going to do anything on engagement in a company, I think this is the one thing. It's training up your managers to be great people managers. And it is a skill. And for me as well, in this current situation, the role of middle managers is crucial. They need to be coaching, they need to be supporting, they need to be guiding employees through this crisis, especially in a larger organization. And the leaders of the organizations need to be telling the middle managers that's their focus, and that's what they need to be doing. Because it's all about how we get back to normal and how we have a motivated and productive team. And of course, I'm sure you've heard the expression that people join an organization, but they leave a manager. And I think that is so true. And I look back at my corporate world when I worked. I remember my very first job, and I left that job because the way my manager treated me. Hopefully he's not on the call. And I still remember 25 years later how he made me feel. I can't remember what I did last week, but I can remember how that manager made me feel 25 years ago. So I think this is, out of all the top 10, the one fundamental one that I would really, really highlight. Number 6, I think it is, is around flexibility. And of course, we've all been working remotely, and that has presented a number of challenges, certainly for Pure Planet. Now, we're lucky in that we have a digital platform. People could work remotely before lockdown. Interestingly enough, most people didn't, even though we gave them the opportunity. And the feedback was that people wanted to come in the office because it was a nice environment. There was great coffee. It was a good vibe. There was a good social, all that kind of stuff. And I think it's really important. And Simon Sinek has done a lovely video on this last week around, do not underestimate the power of having an office where people can go and socialize, and creating that feeling of belonging. And I have adapted to working remotely. It's not my preferred style. I'm desperate to get back into the office, but I do think that, and Pure Planet's office is not open at the moment, but when it does open, that we'll get to a situation where I'll probably go in 2 days a week, and I'll be 3 days a week at home. And I think now is the time to start thinking through what are the expectations. And it's really interesting because I saw some research that was done last week with employees. And it's interesting that, you know, a lot of people think that they are more productive at home. And actually, we've proved that at Pure Planet. We have been more productive remote working. A lot of people are still not comfortable about going back into the office, and that is a key safety thing, I'm sure, and the stress and worry about that. And actually, you know, 57% don't want to go back to whatever the old ways were and don't want to go back to the ways of working. And I think now is the time as we start going back to normal. And I am a little bit confused because I know Boris has said that we're supposed to go back to the office and the government guidelines are still don't go back to the office. However, it's now is the time to start planning for this. And my advice on this is to ask your people what they want and how they want to do it. And then thinking through, how do you engage people when some people are in the office, some people are not. And I know I listened to some podcast last week when somebody was saying about, is there going to be a fear that if you don't go into the office, you're going to miss out? You're going to miss out with what's going on. If there's a very important meeting and people are in the office, are they going to forget that some people who need to be in that meeting are working remotely? Because that's very easy to do. So for me, it's just thinking through, and we've done this thinking at Pure Planet of what are the new ways of working and what are the expectations. And I think people are also crying out to be given some expectations about what is the normal, what is the right thing to do. So again, that for me is a key part of engaging people through this kind of crisis. And for me, the way we've tackled that at Pure Planet, again, as I've touched on upon, is about making people feel connected. This is one of our team meetings, which everybody joins in. We have it every fortnight. We normally have a guest spot. So somebody's done a magic show, another person did a piano recital, a DJ set, all sorts of things just to liven it up a bit, as well as the normal, proper, serious business stuff. The other things we've done, you know, we've done virtual coffee breaks that people can dial into, pub quizzes. We have a Slack channel, which has been a really effective way to communicate. There's some business channels. There's some less serious social channels. For example, we have a dad's joke channel, which has been my particular favorite and has meant that, because I have 2 young children, I have become a comedy legend in my household, and they don't know how I've done that, but the dad jokes channel has worked really well. We've even got a cheese club. And my experience of the cheese club has been that there's a lot of discussion about the alcohol you drink with various cheeses, not necessarily about the cheeses themselves, but that's all part and parcel of it. So this keeping connected, and I know, you know, people on the webinar today, different scenarios, different companies, different industries, different ways of working. This way of working may not work for you because of the environment you're in, but it's thinking through the principle of how do we keep people connected. My last example on this, so we have 3 founders who set up the business, and you can see 2 of them in the top left. So Stephen with a picture behind him and Andrew to the right, and there's another guy called Chris. They have personally video called every single person in the organization. So that's 104 people, purely just to check in, to say, how are you? Are you okay? Are you coping okay? And it took them 4 weeks to do. And they're going to start another round of it in a couple of weeks to check in. And I know not every company can do that, but again, the middle managers, the senior management team, they can divide it up. It's just making sure that everybody is connected. You know, one of my friends has been furloughed. I won't tell you what the organization is, but it's based in Bristol. I was amazed when he told me that his boss has not rang him once during the 4 months that he's been on furlough, which is quite staggering from my point of view, but is a reality. And I'm sure that manager's been busy and hasn't thought, oh, that's an important thing to do. I've got a business to run. I'm in survival mode. But actually, the impact that's having, and that friend of mine was actually calling me because he started to look for another job as a result of the way that he's been treated in all of that. So do think around how you can do that in your organizations in terms about keeping people connected. 3 more to go. Joy, I hear you cry. This situation, as I'm sure you're aware, is having an absolutely massive impact on people's well-being. And I think companies could underestimate the issues that's going to cause over the next year, 2 years, 3 years. I mean, the stress of COVID-19 is bad enough. Then you overlay it with the job situation. Then you overlay it with Zoom calls every day. I think there's now a word in the dictionary for it, Zoom exhaustion or whatever it is. This is an absolutely key area that companies, I know some companies are doing it really well, and I'm really pleased that this is now becoming the forefront. And there's lots of campaigns. I know that it's okay to speak out. It's okay to say you're not okay, which is all great stuff. And one of the upsides, I suppose, of this whole situation is that well-being has really come to the top of the agenda, as it obviously should do. And of course, I don't want to teach you to suck eggs. It is around showing concern. It's about signposting people to lots of different resources which are out there. It's adapting. People are in lots of different circumstances. Certainly at Pure Planet, we've got people with very young kids. In fact, we've had 4 babies during lockdown. Childcare. I've experienced nightmares on homeschooling. I'm amazed that my kids haven't joined me on this webinar to date. All of that, some people are living in 1-bedroom flats. We had one guy who split up with his partner the day before lockdown, and they're still living together because they can't sort it out. And that's just been a complete nightmare, as you can imagine. So it really is at the forefront, and it's about providing reassurance. One of the things we've done at Pure Planet that we found very effective is we've trained up people to be qualified mental health first aiders, which is kind of like being a first aider on a medical point of view, but it's for mental health. And I'd highly recommend that if you're interested in this area, that either you or other people within your organization get trained up. So these people are there as a resource. People can go and talk to them on a confidential basis. They have regular updates from the mental health charities and providers on the latest information, and they send out information to us all on this whole area. So we're up to number 9. Kind of one of the jigsaw pieces that is missing for me so far has been about how we communicate with each other. The style at Pure Planet is very open and honest. We give people all the company information, all the company business issues, which I know in other companies that I've worked for has been kept confidential. But the key thing for us is around feedback, and that's around getting feedback from employees about how they feel, what they want, maybe new things that they want introduced on the benefits package, for example, which we will consider, but not necessarily implement. So the feedback aspect is an important part of the way we work and the way that we deal with people who work within the organization. And I think as well, and I'm kind of repeating myself, but I think it's worth doing just to repeat, this, of course, is a key part of keeping people connected during COVID-19. And indeed, it's communicating the plan moving forward and communicating what's going to happen, the expectations, and making sure that everybody is hearing the message and is given an opportunity to ask questions to clarify the message. So finally, now, I couldn't do a webinar for my favorite recruitment company without mentioning recruitment. And again, I think this is often overlooked in terms of importance, in terms of engagement. It's around recruiting the right people I do hate the word culture fit because I don't think that's the right way. The right people for the organization. So this for me is around attitude. It's around not necessarily skills and experience. So Pure Planet would equally recruit somebody purely because of their attitude, their enthusiasm, their passion, their mindset, their openness, their curiosity. Yes, skills and experience are important, but not maybe in some roles more than others. And indeed, we would put for people through quite a process to make sure that A, we recruit the right people, but B, actually it's right for the person to join this company. Because as we all know, it is very much a two-way process, recruitment. And my last example of this is we take it so seriously, and so we think it's so important that our chief exec, Andrew, interviews absolutely everybody at the final stage, because he feels that that is a really crucial part to our culture, that we're getting people on. We would put people through 3 or 4 stages, and I know that's quite a lengthy process. We do explain that to people right at the beginning so they know, and we explain the reason we do that is that we want to get the right people. And indeed, the feedback we get is once they get to the offer stage, they really feel that, you know, they deserve it because they've been through that process. And we do obviously do a lot of work around talking to them about what Pure Planet is like. And we do say, look, if it's not right for you, please don't join, because that's not the right thing. So recruitment is the final one. So just to summarize, I don't like putting words on PowerPoint slides, but I thought it was just important just to summarize with these things around COVID-19 and the situation, and kind of where I think we're up to, and hopefully this will resonate with you. So I do think that people need this sense of direction, this understanding, and this reassurance, and leaders do have a real key part to play in all of that. They need to provide people with this plan of the way forward. They need to demonstrate empathy and understanding with people's individual circumstances and situations. And it's a bit, we are the world, I know, but they do need to provide this hope and positivity, because we are in completely unprecedented times, as we all know. And I do think my overall summary is the key part to this all is the role of the middle managers. I really do think this is crucial and critical in coaching and supporting and guiding employees through this crisis. And indeed, leaders need to give this very big steer that that is the middle manager's focus and their priority. And hopefully we'll come out of this. I mean, if I'm invited back to do the next signature webinar in a year's time, hopefully we can talk about more positive things around how we came out of this situation. And I think people call it the new normal, which I don't particularly like. I've heard this expression, bouncing back and springing forward. So hopefully we'll spring forward to a better place than we have been in organizations. So thank you very much for your time. I've overran, which will come as a great surprise to Eve and Sharon. Very unlike me. Love to connect, do link in, do say hello. Happy to take questions now. The last podcast I did say I'm happy to answer any questions if I can't deal with them now, and then I got presented with 100 questions to answer, which took me about 3 weeks to do, but I did answer them all. If you can make the multiple choice, it does make my life a bit easier. But thank you, and I'll hand back to Eve or Sharon, who will be the host for the questions.
Thanks, Rich. That was great. Really, really useful points there. I was certainly taking notes throughout. We've had quite a few questions coming through during that talk. Some of them overlap slightly, so I'll combine where it seems appropriate, if that's okay. So we've got 2 questions that are similar along the lines of what advice would you give to organisations who are engaging with employees who are working in their client's office rather than centralised? And alongside that, if you have an organisation that has lots of contractors that represent the company, so they're not employees, how would you engage with them?
Yeah, I mean, great questions. I think we have contractors at Pure Planet. I know there's some legality around this, or IR35 and all that, but we actually do treat them exactly the same as we would a normal member of staff, and we do consider them to be a part of the team. I know there is a subtle difference and you need to be careful, but they would get the same messages, the same communication. They are, for example, invited to all our team meetings, all our socials. So my advice on contractors, assuming that this complies with the legality on it, is that I would treat them the same. And again, I would answer it the same way for being on client side. I've been in that situation where people are often, when they're on client side, they kind of go towards the client more than they do the actual company. And if you ask the question, who do you work for? They might say the client. So there is that subtlety, but again, I would treat them the same. But also, of course, they're remote, but then the same rules apply that we're remote now. I suppose my answer to it as well is don't forget that they're as important as people who are in your actual office, because it's, as I said at the beginning, it's very easy to go off the radar.
Thanks, Rich. How would you start to work with someone who's lost their trust in their employer or workplace? So perhaps where there's too much tick box, what would be your starting point to build up that trust again?
I would, I'd probably do a very simple finding out what has happened, why they've lost trust, what are the key issues. I often say that in my freelance world that if I just sit in an office for an hour and observe what's going on around me, I can give a pretty good view of what the culture's like, about the way people are talking to each other, the way people are interacting, and then support that with kind of what's written in the employee handbook and all that kind of stuff. You know, trust is a very difficult thing. It's a very subjective thing. It's a very emotional thing. I would just go to what has happened, what is causing this. It's often emanating from my experience, from leadership, their style, the way they deal with people. And then that's, you know, for me, if I was doing it on a consultancy basis, a very honest, which I can do because you're a consultant, with the leaders to say, look, this is the effect you're having on people. This is what's happening. Do you want this to continue? What do you want? You know, in that engineering company that I work for, I had to walk away in the end because they just did not get it. They did not want to change. They liked the status. They liked the command and control way of operating, and they were never going to think. So my advice would be, do all the stuff you can do internally, but at the end of the day, if it's not the right place for you, you know, and it's easy for me to say, is go get yourself a job in an organization where you want to work and you know you'll enjoy it.
Thanks, Rich. Gosh, the questions keep on coming in, so we'll try to race through a few, but we might go 1 or 2 minutes over, unfortunately.
It's Paris, the next one. Paris, definitely.
What have you learnt from your COVID experience that will improve your business in the years to come?
Oh, that is a great question. I wish somebody had asked me that yesterday so I could prepare. What have we learned? I think we've learned, and this might sound a little bit twee, that actually our culture has really come to the fore, which we had developed over time, and it's really paid dividends for us. I think as well that before there was a kind of feeling that actually you can't really engage people when they work remotely. And I think, you know, I've been working for a company, and I will name it because I think they're brilliant, called Chiero in Bath. They all work virtually, and they have done for many years. They have people in every European country. And they asked me to do a project about how engaged they were. And I thought, oh, this team are going to be really disconnected. They're going to be really isolated. They were all virtual. How can this possibly, you know, work? And actually, they were the most engaged team I'd ever come across. And they were brilliant. And it was because the leader of that organization, Louise, knew that was going to be a challenge and had done, or not overcompensated, but have been really on the ball of knowing that keeping people connected was the key thing, and had set up lots of different opportunities for that to happen. And I think that's what I've learned is, you know, indeed, I probably know people better now at Pure Planet than I did before, because suddenly you're in their front rooms, you're in you're in the library, as you can see. People are sharing more, I think, because they and you know, they're more vulnerable and they're more open and honest. I don't know whether it's because there's the screen is the protection or whatever it is. So I've learned, I think, that it's very possible, and indeed you can engage people just as well working remotely. So I'm waffling on a bit, which you know is completely unlike me.
Oh, thanks, Rich. I'll move on to the next question. How do you best assess in an hour interview the culture fit or the right attitude for that company?
For us, it's around mindset. It's around obviously highly skilled questions. It's just getting people to talk really about their passions, their interests, the way they work. It's the rapport. We have looked at, I know there's some recruitment people on here. Let's be honest, interviewing somebody for an hour is not really the most effective way of assessing people to do a job for the rest of their life or for the next 5 years. So that's why we put people through 3 stages. Also, we're looking now at any psychometric assessments that we could do around that. It's also, actually, we give people a tour of the building. Now it's more difficult virtually, and that is a key thing for us, whether how interested they are, do they ask questions, how much they know about renewable energy. And also the Q&A at the end of the interview is really telling, because we want to recruit people who are curious, who want to learn, who want to develop. And if they don't have any questions, then that's, I think, a clear sign around that element. But yes, I would agree, interviewing somebody for an hour can be a bit odd in terms of the assessment. Am I allowed to say that on a recruitment webinar?
You have, so yes.
This is the last time Rich Roberts ever appeared.
Got one final question for you, and then we'll wrap up. So the question is, what are some of the most critical downsides of flexible working arrangements? I'll flip that into how do you overcome these?
I think, technology has got to be one of them. If your tech isn't good, and I'm amazed that I've kept going for a whole hour, because probably about 10:30, without fail, Virgin Media have cut me off in my house in the last 3 weeks. So tech is really important. I think what the major barrier, I think trust. I think I've worked with certain managers and leaders who think working from home means you're not working, you're watching Neighbours or whatever. So it's getting over that element of trust people to do the right thing. The other barrier is just, I find it difficult. We've had 12 people join Pure Planet in the last 3 months. I haven't met them face to face. They've been inducted into the organization, and I do that face to face bit. And I think as we move, if the office is open, and we've talked about, we've got one guy who's moving to Manchester, and he was going to leave, and he's kind of turned around and said, look, can I stay? Because we can do this remotely, can't we? And we've said, yeah, actually we can. Now we've said, look, we need to have people coming in. It's up to them, of course, but at least once a month, just to keep that contact and that face-to-face, very much for that person as well as for us, if you like. So I think working purely remotely, and I think the other thing to remember is human beings are very social animals, aren't they? That's the way we've developed. And I would hate to think that, I know a lot of people have said, oh, we're now going to go remotely full time and we're going to close our office. As Simon Sinek said on that little video I mentioned last week, is don't underestimate the power of the face-to-face and the social interaction. So for me, it's making interventions. And so, for example, the guy in Manchester, we have a team meeting every month. We've said to him, look, we'd love you to come to the team meeting. Come on down. We do a social every month as well, which normally is after the team meeting in the evening. So come to the social, stay over, come into the office the next day. So we are creating opportunities for people so they don't lose that face-to-face stuff.
Yeah, that's great. Thank you. Rich, thanks so much for sharing your wisdom with us over the last hour, and for answering some of those questions, which were excellent. So thank you to our attendees as well. We hope you found it useful and you've been scribbling as many notes as I have to take away and implement. There'll be further in our webinar series coming over the summer months. If you have any questions for Rich, Evelyn or I, our contact details were on the initial emails, and I think Rich has shared them and is happy to as well. Have a great rest of day, and we'll look forward to catching up with you in the near future.
Thank you.
Bye.
Thank you. Thanks everyone. Bye.